Hi, and welcome to Historical Influence. Here, we explore amazing stories of people and events that shaped our history. Join us to learn, discover, and get inspired by the past in a fun and engaging way. The Black Death was a bubonic plague pandemic that devastated Eurasia and North Africa between 1346 and 1353. This period marked the beginning of the Second Plague Pandemic. The event is considered one of the most fatal pandemics in human history. The mortality rate was catastrophic. Estimations suggest that between 25 million and 50 million people perished. In Europe, perhaps 50% of the 14th century population died, with estimates ranging from 30 to 60% of the population. The name Black Death was not used contemporaneously in Europe, but was popularized by Scandinavian chroniclers in the 15th and early 16th centuries. The Black Death was the second major natural disaster to strike Europe in the late Middle Ages, following the Great Famine of 1315 to 1317. The disease itself is caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, which has been traced to the Tian Shan Mountains in Kyrgyzstan. According to the predominant modern theory, the disease spread when climate change in Asia caused rodents to flee dried-out grasslands toward more populated areas. Contributing to the rapid spread in Europe was a widespread lack of hygiene in urban centers, where streets were usually unhygienic with filth, live animals, and human parasites. In much of medieval Europe, sanitation legislation sometimes only required homeowners to shout, "Look out below," before dumping a full chamber pot into the street. The plague was reportedly first introduced to Europe via Genoese traders from their port city of Kaffa in the Crimea in 1347. During the siege of Kaffa in 1345 to 1346, the Mongol Golden Horde army, suffering from the disease, catapulted infected corpses over the city walls to infect the inhabitants. As the disease took hold, Genoese traders fled across the Black Sea, bringing the disease to Constantinople in the summer of 1347. Carried by 12 Genoese galleys, the plague arrived by ship in Sicily in October 1347. From there, it quickly moved to mainland Italy. By January 1348, the plague had reached Genoa and Venice. The plague spread rapidly across the Mediterranean and inland. By late summer 1348, it reached Cairo, the largest city in the Mediterranean basin, killing more than a third of its residents. From Italy, the disease moved northwest, striking France, Spain, Portugal, and England by June 1348. It reached Norway in 1349 and northern Russia in 1352, reaching Moscow in 1353. The most commonly noted symptom of the bubonic form was the appearance of bubios, painfully swollen lymph nodes or gavociolos, in the groin, neck, or armpits, which could grow as large as an apple or egg. Symptoms also included acute fever, vomiting, and bloody sputum. Left untreated, 80% of bubonic plague victims died within 8 days. Other forms included pneumonic plague, which infected the lungs and had a mortality rate of 90 to 95%. There is evidence that once ashore, the Black Death spread mainly person to person as pneumonic plague, explaining its quick inland spread. Septicemic plague, the rarest form, which presented with high fevers and purple skin patches with an untreated mortality rate near 100%. As the disease spread, 14th century healers and governments were unable to stop it, causing many Europeans to turn to astrological factors, earthquakes, or the deliberate poisoning of wells by Jews as explanations. Many believed the epidemic was a punishment from God for their sins. Muslim religious scholars, however, taught that the pandemic was a martyrdom and mercy from God for believers and a punishment for non-believers. In Europe, renewed religious fervor and fanaticism
led to the rise of groups like the Flagellants in Germany, hooded men who marched, sang, and thrashed themselves with lashes. This period also saw brutal persecutions, as Europeans targeted groups such as Jews, lepers, foreigners, and beggars. A fury of anti-Semitic massacres followed the plague along the Rhine. For instance, in the Strasbourg massacre in February 1349, about 2,000 Jews were murdered. By 1351, 60 major and 150 smaller Jewish communities had been destroyed.
The scale of death caused mass burials to become necessary in Europe, with some sites holding hundreds or thousands of bodies. Urban centers were especially hard hit. The population of Florence was reduced from between 110,000 and 120,000 inhabitants in 1338 to 50,000 in 1351. Chroniclers noted the breakdown of social bonds. Father abandoned child, wife husband, one brother another, for this illness seemed to strike through the breath and sight. The overwhelming death rate, likely 45 to 50% of the European population over 4 years, led to a complete restructuring of society. The level of mortality contributed to the destabilization and crumbling of feudalism.
The medical faculty of Paris, in an early attempt to explain the cause, suggested that a conjunction of planets had caused a great pestilence in the air, miasma theory. The definitive causative agent, the bacterium Yersinia pestis, was not discovered until 1894 by Alexander Yersin. Molecular evidence confirming the role of Y. pestis in the Black Death came in 2010 through DNA analysis of tooth sockets in human skeletons from mass graves. While the oriental rat flea is the primary vector for bubonic plague transmission, academic debate continues regarding the specific means of spread in the 14th century. Some researchers note that the Black Death spread too quickly to be solely attributed to rat fleas, suggesting that person-to-person transmission, such as through pneumonic plague or human fleas and body lice, was more likely.
The drastic reduction in the population led to profound economic and social changes. Due to the severe labor shortage, wages soared. Commoners came to enjoy more freedom, and many survivors inherited property from the dead. The aristocracy attempted to pass laws to prevent the rise of the peasants, leading to upheaval and revolution. The devastation, particularly in Italy, may have resulted in a shift in worldview, causing thinkers to dwell more on life on earth rather than spirituality and the afterlife. This is theorized to have ultimately led to the Renaissance. The practice of isolating the sick became institutionalized during this time. The city-state of Ragusa implemented a 30-day isolation period in 1377 for new arrivals from plague-affected areas, later extending it to 40 days, giving rise to the word quarantine, from the Italian word for 40.
The Black Death was the start of the second plague pandemic. The plague recurred frequently throughout Europe and the Mediterranean from the 14th to 17th centuries. For example, the Great Plague of London, 1665, killed up to 100,000 people. Cairo suffered more than 50 plague epidemics within 150 years. The third plague pandemic began in China in the mid-19th century, spreading globally and killing 10 million people in India alone. The investigation into this pandemic led to the naming of the pathogen Yersinia pestis.
In modern times, plague is treated with antibiotics and insecticides. However, the disease remains enzootic, commonly present in populations of fleas, carried by ground rodents in various areas worldwide, including Central Asia, Uganda, and the Western United States. An estimate of the modern case fatality rate, even with antibiotics, is 11%. There are fears that the bacterium could develop drug resistance.
and drug-resistant strains have been reported in places like Madagascar, 1995, 2014, 2017.
Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that shaped our world.